For 32 years here in Windsor called Star Contracting, and they built a number of homes around town and then later changed to commercial post frame buildings. And in that role he also tore down a number of the buildings that we're going to see in his speech today, which kind of gave him a unique perspective on some of these. He's served the community over the years, 12 and a half years on the school board, a year on town board, and then was elected mayor in 2004 and served as mayor for 4 years, 2004 to 2008. So now he's retired. He's a pretty fantastic woodworker, has recently undertaken rebuilding or building old clocks, and also likes to garden and spend time with the kids and grandkids, and we keep him busy with a lot of projects as well. So we had a really good crowd last night, a little smaller today, but that's okay. Nice and intimate. We'd love questions, welcome discussion. If you could save them till the end, that'd be great, just to kind of keep the flow of the presentation going. But we had a couple questions last night and it was fine as well. So he's going to walk us through his experiences of growing up in Windsor and some of the old buildings that have actually been lost over time, and just talk about his experiences, and hopefully you take a few nuggets of history with you and enjoy the presentation. So, and we are planning on this being about 35-40 minutes. I know we have an open house style here, so if you can't stay that long, understand, but would love to have you if you can. So I will turn it over to my dad, Ed Stark.
Thank you, Melanie. Glad that you're all here. It was a great crowd last night, and this is, as Melanie said, a lot smaller, but that's fine because I like to talk to the people individually quite often, which I've already done. I am struggling with some allergy issues, as you can notice in the voice. Last night it was my eyes. I looked like I just, had been bawling all day long. It was, coming down my cheeks, but anyway, it's just something we'll deal with. I'd like to give you a little bit of view of somewhat to interject small town life in this presentation, because a lot of these things I can relate to, a few of them I cannot. But anyway, growing up here in Windsor as a young boy, and that was the way the kids were treated. We were about 1,500 population. We were truly free-ranging kids. Our area of playing and exploring was from the bluffs southeast of Windsor, near the old Messel base, the Poudre River, the Windsor Lake. We did a lot of hunting, ice skating, whatever. We just were very active and truly free-ranging kids. We were just kind of turned loose. Couldn't get away with too much because everybody knew who we were. So it was really a good place, a good time to grow up. Our first building here was originally built as a school, and served that for a number of years, and then a library, the town library, which was kind of always on the back burner as far as funding, wound up getting the building from the school district. I don't know if they leased it or whatever, but this was the librarian here, Mrs. Owl Branch, and I remember her in my earlier years, and my wife Joanne does very much so, because she used the library a lot more than I did, so she knew Mrs. Branch. But anyway, in about 1945, there was a newly formed congregation, Bethel Lutheran Church, wound up buying the school from the RE4 school district. I think the school district wanted to get rid of it, and it was a good startup place for a young church. They bought the property, and in a few years they acquired enough money to build a new one. This is on the corner of 4th and Walnut Street, on the northeast corner, and today this building is gone. It's been replaced by a more modern structure, but the church that was built around it was never really connected to this. It's a beautiful church. The masonry work in all the rock lane was done by a guy out of Boulder, and just did a beautiful job on it. This was torn down in, I believe, the 1980s. I was on the committee to build the new parish hall, and for a lot of reasons, the old parish hall was raised. Joanne and I had our wedding reception there in 1965. It was still in use at that time. Okay. Okay, this building here was on Main Street, I think the corner of 2nd and Main, the northeast corner. Today the property is occupied by Borage Salvage and Glass. When I was a kid, this was known as Dave Winograd's Junkyard. And Dave Winograd was the owner. His man that ran it was a guy by the name of Cliff Morey, one of the earlier Moreys that are still there. And they basically bought steel, scrap iron, cast iron, copper, aluminum. They also bought bottles, like old wine bottles. I don't know what they did with them. Cotton rags, chickens, anything for a buck, I would say. The building was replaced in, I think, the 1990s. And as a kid, I remember, going down there, and when the owner, or I should say the proprietor, Cliff Morey, wasn't looking, we would sneak upstairs into the old hotel, and it basically was just a series of rooms. There was no bathrooms. I don't even remember seeing any heating. I assume they probably had heat at the lower level and gravitated up, but it just got really in poor condition, and it was torn down. But I do like the old Western style front that is on the building, and it's seen on a few other buildings in Windsor, but not too many. Okay. Okay, this is the Poudre Valley. I don't know a lot about this building. It was still there when I was a kid, but it had been repurposed. I believe the brick wall, some of this was taken out. They put overhead doors in it, and it was used for storage. But this I found out yesterday that this is Roy Ray. He was the owner and editor of the Windsor Beacon for many years. Wrote a history book on Windsor, and this, I believe, was his wife. I don't know, I don't remember the other people in there. But I don't remember this building ever looking like this, so I don't have a lot of history on it or remembrance of it. Okay, this was the Osterhout Lumber Company. It was on the south side of Main Street, just west of the 4th Street. It was in the 400 block. When I was a kid, this was no longer a lumber company, but some of the structures for it were still there. In the back of this building, the yard was still the lumber bins where they stacked their lumber and had a roof over it. There was a warehouse, a 2-story warehouse back there, and our company tore the warehouse down probably in the 1980s. And I did have a couple of pictures which I gave Caitlin, the museum curator here. So that may be the only pictures they have of it. But after it was Dick's Creamery, which they processed milk, they made some dairy products there, ice cream, whatever. And I don't remember exactly when it went out of business, but eventually left. Then it was replaced by, excuse me, it became a veterinary clinic for Dr. Wayne Miller, who was the town mayor for many years, and his partner, Dr. Ted Reiser, prominent veterinary doctor here for many years. After that, it became Stewart's Heating and Plumbing. I remember the Stewarts very well. And then it kind of, the upstairs, some people just kind of found it a place to live in, and they just kind of, what do they call them, squatters today. And the building became very decrepit, and the owners finally tore it down. and eventually they built a car wash on the property. It's still there. Okay, the movie theater. This was located on the north side of Main Street, just west of 5th Street. There's a little park there. There's a gazebo. That's where the Windsor Theater was. It was built by a fellow by the name of G.I. Richards. He was the local mortician and fairly successful. He was somebody that had some money, and he had operated a movie theater in other buildings in town. And this one he built, it was built in 1928-29, opened on Armistice Day of 1929. He built it at a cost of $24,000. It was I believe the first theater built outside of Denver that was really designed for sound movies. It had an arched ceiling. The interior had a material, it was made by the Celotex Corporation. It was kind of a fiberboard material. It was embossed and had been colored or stained. It didn't look like paint. It looked like it was stained material. It was really pretty grand looking theater. Also had a sloped floor. Went up to the screen, which originally, as a kid, I remember just a square screen. It was fairly small. And then they came out with the new, I think they called it Panavision or VistaVision, and it was the much wider screen. That was added later. The theater only had, some people have said it had 2 screens. No, it just had one. The building was operated for many years by Mr. Richards, and then later another family took it, the Stanger family, and they ran it for a number of years. And then something happened in mid-1950s, television. And I remember it very well. It just was like overnight, just like cell phones today. They just all of a sudden appeared. But you know, the John Bruner and Company, the Manweilers, Palmquist Electric, Gamble's, everybody was selling televisions, and they were putting these ugly things on top of the houses called antennas. And that really was kind of the demise of the theater business. The attendance just dropped dramatically. Eventually it just became kind of a place for kids. Saturday afternoon matinees. Saturday night you could meet your boyfriend, girlfriend there, and that's kind of what it became. Some of the movies I remember there, Hot Lead with Gene Autry, The Gun That Won the West, which was the story of the Winchester rifle, Quo Vadis, which was a religious film, The 10 Commandments, Creature with the Atomic Brain. I remember that one. It just scared the devil out of me because in the movie this guy inadvertently he's in a convertible and his hat blows off and his friend looks over at him and they can see where he had all these sutures where they'd replaced his brain and just scared the death out of me. So I do remember some of the movies. Of course, Roy Rogers, Dale Evans. We had a fan club, and we supposedly wrote to Roy Rogers, and he would write back to us. I'm sure it was his secretary or whoever. But eventually it fell into disrepair. It was owned by the First National Bank, which was across the street. They had bought it as a part of some other buildings they purchased. They were going to build a new bank on that side of the street, and that never did materialize. But after numerous families tried to operate it, and they basically got in financial trouble, and they left the heat off, and it froze the building up, and the banker finally in 1981 hired my company to demolish it. We took it down by hand, and the brick was really a good market for used brick at the time. They were selling for more than new brick. We had about 70,000 brick in the building. We started selling the brick off, and one day a lady drove up and asked what we're doing, and we told her we were demolishing the building and selling materials, and she wanted to know how much the brick was, and I think it was 35 cents a piece. And she asked how many we had left, and I said about 50,000. And she said, I'll take all of them. And found out it was Mrs. Peterson. Her family owned the Toyota dealership in Fort Collins, and they were building a new house up at the country club. So that's where the brick went, or most of it. The theater seats, there's a few of them. You know, we sold them to anybody that, I think we're selling them like $1 a piece. And a few of the people around town bought them. I think the town of Windsor has a few in their museum collection, but the majority of them went to Producer's Livestock Barn on the north side of Greeley. So that's kind of where the seats went. The light fixtures were all cast brass. It also had matching sconces on the walls, and we wound up selling all the light fixtures for over $3,000. And what's kind of interesting, just this last year, 2 of the fixtures came back to me. The people had bought them, had never used them, and they didn't want to just throw them away, so they asked if I wanted them back. So they just gave them back to me. So that's kind of where the materials went. One thing I do remember, there was a huge boiler in the back, and it was all cast iron. At that time, Maury's, we always called it the junkyard, was actively taking lots of steel. And we took this boiler and we loaded it up, and it was all coated in this white material, and we didn't really think anything about it. Well, it was asbestos. And we survived the handling of it, but I assume it got all scraped off down there, and you know, we didn't have asbestos abatement programs in. So that's kind of the history of the theater. It was kind of bittersweet to take it down, but it would be really an asset for the town today. So
Projection room.
huh? Oh, forgot the projection room. That was really pretty interesting because it was all lined with steel, and the 3 projector ports that let the projection go down onto the screen all had doors above them that were hanging from the ceiling, and they had a fusible link. And also the entrance door was controlled by a fusible link. The problem was with the early film, they were so flammable, they were actually almost explosive. That's how flammable they were. So that's the way they built projection rooms, and they just figured, you know, save everybody else, don't worry about the projectionist that was running the show.
Dangerous job.
Yeah. So that's the movie theater that we tore down in 1981. This here is a picture on Main Street, Secular Store. I believe this is one of the first buildings, commercial buildings built in downtown Windsor. When I was a kid, it was a shoe repair shop. We just called it the shoe shop. You could get new heels, new soles, or half soles. Basically, they repaired their shoes until, you know, the tops were, you know, probably totally gone. The building fell in real bad disrepair. It had a wooden floor. It was just sitting on rocks, and you know, it was just, the wood was just rotting away. And it was owned by a lady by the name of Anna Carolyn Teller, and the local JC's club needed a project, and they offered to tear the building down for her. So in early 1971, we lost the Secular Store. The other building beside it is interesting. This was where the Windsor Mercantile was. It was originally started by the Teller family back in the 1800s, and it was a general merchandise store. They sold groceries, they sold dry goods, they sold hardware, farm implements. They also bought commodities from farmers at one time. And after the Teller family, eventually a guy by the name of John Fry owned it. Very influential family in Windsor. And John also had another business. He was like a banker. Quite often farmers would be financed by him, and you know, they bought everything through his store, and then at the end of the year when the crops were harvested, they would go in and settle up. Well, sometimes there wasn't enough money to settle up, and John Fry wound up with the farm. He owned numerous farms in the area. They were called Fry farms, and you know, that's just the way business was done. The upper part was owned and used by the International Order of the Odd Fellows. So it was kind of a strange situation. Somebody owned the bottom half of the building, somebody else owned the top half. And there was two places like that in Windsor. There was this building, and then where the Hearth Restaurant is, the upper floors were owned by the Masons. The lower part, various individuals owned that. And eventually that building, through not paying their taxes, whatever, the upper part was acquired by somebody that owned the bottom. So it finally became under one ownership. This one still has, somebody owns the top and lives in it, and then there's businesses that own the bottom. So that's the Windsor Mercantile Store part. Okay, this is a sugar beet dump. I'm not familiar with these. These are before my time. As you can see, the horse-drawn wagons. But quite often farmers would bring their sugar beets right to the factory. Depends how close they lived. But for the guys that lived further out, they established what they call beet dumps. And this is where farmers would bring their beets and drop them. Later on, the sugar company came in and loaded them onto rail cars, and they railed them into the plants. And I can remember a lot of these. There was the Bracewell sugar dump, there was the Black Hollow sugar dump, the Hurrick beet dump. You know, they were all around the area. But I don't know the particulars, this one, but that's what those were. Okay, this is on the corner of Walton and Chimney Park Drive. It was the Great Western Sugar Company, which is basically right across the street was the sugar factory. And they built this to house workers in their factory when they had what they call campaign. Campaign usually started in the fall and went through the winter into January, February. Campaign meant when they basically fired the factory up, got it up and running, they started slicing beets to extract the sugar. And once the beets started coming in, they operated until they processed all the piles that were brought in by train. But that's kind of how they operated. I had an uncle, I just barely remember this building. I had an uncle that lived here for a short time. But the building was torn down in the 1950s, and I do remember that. Okay, this is known as the Robert Harris home, the 500 block of Main Street. Actually, it was just right over here, west of that little pocket park. There's like 4 little businesses in separate buildings there. That's where this was taken. I believe this is the corner of what was known as the Yancey building. The Yancey family was very prominent in Windsor. They built a large building across the street. This was their one of their livery stables. They had another one earlier on. But if you come up and look at this picture, this corner up here, oh, did I touch the screen? Anyway, that is this building here, the south side of the Windsor Town Hall. And the picture here shows apparently they're auctioning off a horse. But what's interesting, if you look at all the people, or a lot of them, dressed around here, they look like they're from Eastern Europe. And it's probably where they came from. And that's the clothes they had. Okay? Okay, this is actually the early beginnings of the Windsor Town Hall. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Previously it was the Park School building. Before that, this was the first wing of the existing Park School building, which is now the Windsor Town Hall. This was the high school. I think it was probably in the 1930s or possibly 20s. This was torn down, and then they added a center section and then another wing that basically the front matched this side. So if you were to flip to the next picture, the picture of the building that you were looking at was this portion right here. In the 1930s, they added the center section, and then they added the west section that matches this. Also, they added the third floor, which was the auditorium. Yeah, I never knew that, but they said at one time that's where they played basketball. It was probably big enough to do that. But this is where my mother-in-law attended school when she was a little girl, and that lasted clear through until my daughter went to preschool there. So it was used as a very long time in Windsor's history as an elementary school. Let's see, I refer to my cards every once in a while so I don't skip something. You know, in the 1980s, it was no longer used as a school, so the school district had its offices in this part of the building, and for the rest of it was basically empty, and they were thinking about boarding it up or you know just getting rid of it. About the same time, the town of Windsor, this was the town hall, and the boiler had died in it, and they tried to heat the building with electric baseboard heat, and the first winter it got so miserable in here that they closed the town hall so the employees could go home. It was too cold in here to operate. So then the town of Windsor was interested in this portion of the building, and with an intergovernmental agreement, I was on the school board at that time, we leased a portion of this building and a few rooms upstairs to the town of Windsor. A few years later, school district wanted basically to build its own facility. The town of Windsor needed more space, so with another agreement, I think the town bought the rest of the building from the school district, and it's now the Windsor Town Hall. In 2008, it was hit by the tornado, almost took the upper floor off. Structurally, it was really, really precarious. They weren't sure they were going to be able to save it, but I did know the director of buildings, a guy by the name of John Moore, and they got structural engineers in. They did save the building and did a lot of other work, so it really serves the town very well. And I think some schools look like schools. This one, you look at it, and it could be either a school or a municipal headquarters or town hall. So that's a story on the Bar School building. Okay, the Windsor Sugar Factory was built in the early 1900s. It's located on East Walnut, just east of the Chimney Park Drive. It was a major employer in Windsor. If you had a permanent job, that was a big deal back in the 30s and 40s. That I hear from people that worked there. I knew a lot of people spent their entire life working for the Great Western. So it served the community very well. It also was a major financial interest for farmers because of all the sugar beets raised in the area. They had a huge economic impact. All that's left of the building today, well, this smokestack actually was torn down years earlier because see how short it is? And you can see what it's doing, dumping that all, right on Windsor. So they tore this down and they replaced it with the current smokestack that is still out there today. And then to the west of that is the warehouse. That is still there. That's in use. And then the west of that is the sugar bins. And those are still being used. They bring all the sugar in by rail and ship it out by rail. It's just a storage area for, I don't know which sugar company is using it, but they still do use them. Okay, the Windsor Water Tower. That's set over here on Ash and 7th Street, just west of the American Legion. That was taken down, I think, it was taken down in the 1980s Joanne and I watched them lift it down. You can see the big piece of steel here that sticks out. It's got a big hole in it. I think there was 4 of them welded onto it. They had a huge crane that, you know, took the weight, and then somebody went up in a bucket truck and they cut the legs off. They just picked it up and set it down and laid it on its side. It wound up going to some business north of Greeley. I don't know what they used it for. I don't know if it's still there, but it had been in Windsor, you know, for many, many years. I don't remember it ever being in use, and that's why it was taken down. It wasn't in use any longer. And the other thing that was unique about it, it had a well house and a pump house below, right below it. And when they were just tearing it down, my brother and myself went in, the doors were open, and there was a well. I swear it was 8 to 10 feet in diameter. It was all laid up with stone, and we took a rock about that big, and the water was just as clear as glass. We threw that rock in there, and with flashlight we watched it go down, 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 and it disappeared. The town, I guess, filled it in. It was probably unfortunate because it probably would have established some well or water rights today. But it's all gone. Okay, this is the Windsor Mill. It was, I don't know exactly when it was built. It says here 1890. This was originally the brick portion here was a flour mill. It produced flour for some time. Eventually it became just a grain elevator where farmers stored their grains, corn, barley, oats, and the office was over here on this end, and it was a pretty good sized office, probably about as big as this room here. And it was certainly a gathering place for farmers to come in and complain about the weather or the prices, or talk about how good their crops were or how bad their neighbors were. So it was really a kind of a coffee gathering place for farmers. Let's see. It was also badly damaged in the tornado of 2008. But in 2017, it was undergoing renovation into, I think, like a brew pub and a restaurant, mostly in this end where it was brick. This end here was all cribbed. The rooms would have been no bigger than 12 feet by 12 feet, and those bins went from the top all the way to the ground, probably 50, 60 feet deep. Very hard to convert that into any kind of usable office space or anything. But anyway, in 2017, while it was undergoing renovation, it basically burned to the ground. And then the family that owned it rebuilt it in a similar fashion as it looked there.